up, though? What up? What up, though? What up, though? What up? What up, though? What up, everybody? How you guys doing? I'm your host, Davon. We are back with an episode of Brand the Ruckus Podcast. You can find me on all social media platforms at Davon Ambitious. That's DVOM underscore ambitious. As well as follow me on all platforms at Brand the Ruckus Podcast. We are back though with another episode. We're here to talk about my hometown, Detroit Pistons. All right, cool. What's up? We live. Y'all want to walk y'all again? Another episode of Brandon Records Podcast. I got Zar here, the bully ball. So we talking some Pistons. So what up? What up though? How you
What
doing?
up? What up, though? I'm good. I'm home for the weekend from Michigan State. It's rare that I'm wearing Michigan State merch. It's just you caught me on a good day.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, it's I'm doing good. The season is close to starting finally. This has felt like the longest off season of my entire life. Like it. I feel like I have aged 3 years since the last time the Pistons have played basketball. Um, with all the Monty stuff, new coach, JB, Trajan, the whole offseason moves, and then this just dead period of the last few months where nothing happened. It's been interesting, but I'm ready to go. Media day is in about a week or so now, so I'm ready to get started again.
No, I feel it's been a long weekend from or a long off season for me too as well. Like I was giving up on the Pistons. And like I'm a Pistons fan. This podcast we're gonna talk about all the teams, but I'm a Pistons fans first most. But I was giving up on the Pistons, but then they fired Monty. I mean, it kind of gave me hope. I'm not gonna lie. I was at work and like soon I seen the little notification like usually I'm cool at work. I just was like you know like oh yeah we good. But how do you feel about Monty being fired?
Oh man, so that is a loaded question for me because Monty was someone who I when the Pistons hired him, I thought was a great hire. Especially because it seemed like the coaching search at the time was kind of just swimming upstream. There was no real momentum, any direction, seemingly. And then you had this candidate all of a sudden come up, Monty Williams, who just, as of when they hired him, I think 2 seasons before was in the NBA Finals. I'm like, okay, this is a home run hire if you can go get him. Like you have to make at least an effort, to go and hire him. And I remember the first I ever heard of Monty like getting hired with the Pistons or talking with the Pistons, excuse me, was back with Mark Stein. I think he was the first person to report the Pistons having interest. And I remember reading that and being like, okay, like interesting. Like I assumed they would have interest just based on like how things are typically run. Tom Gores has always went for your like more prestigious name value type of coaches. When he goes to hire his coaches, looking at like Dwayne Casey, Stan Van Gundy, he just typically goes for like the bigger names. So it made sense that they would have interest. And then it also came out that they got turned down by Monty, as did any other team. Um, but when it came out that they had not given up and continued the search and then eventually come to an agreement, I was like, this is the best hire the Pistons could have made. I thought Dwayne Casey, I think, got a lot of flack, and I think a lot of it was undeserved. A lot of people talked about how Monty really had nothing to work with last year. I would say Monty inherited a better roster than like 90% of the ones Dwayne Casey had. And even then, the roster obviously was not, consistent and not really very well constructed. But even then, Casey didn't really have a lot to work with. And I think he was someone that like it seemed like addition by subtraction for a lot of fans. And I mean, honestly, like myself included, not because I thought Dwayne Casey was ever a bad coach or anything like that, but sometimes like, voices wear thin. Maybe like offensive schemes don't really hit the same as they used to. I think that was probably like, if I had a critique of Casey's, it was definitely the offense. I feel like his offense kind of lacked creativity towards the end, but then again, like how much can you really do with, the roster you're being given? But either way, I was like, okay, Monty Williams will come in and bring this whole new modern NBA type of offense to the Detroit Pistons. And then also there was a lot of talk about him really being defensively focused, which was something he was never really known for in his coaching career. He's always been seen more as the offensive coach. I looked more at the offensive schemes the Suns would run in the last few years, and I was thinking of like the ball movement and all these other things. And I thought, man, like you got Cade, you got Ivy, and then I still believed in Killian, which
I feel that.
you know, went the way it did. It is what it is. But I thought even Killian would benefit from that, because it's just the amount of touches that everybody gets in that system, and like the type of point guard that Monty Williams has liked throughout his career. I thought Killian would be a great fit for that, obviously off the bench, but more than anything, I thought Cade would really be like, the center focus, and there would be this real emphasis on this modern NBA offense, and that just wasn't what happened at all, actually. I think the best offense and the best the Pistons ever looked during the Monty Williams era was like those first 3 games, 3 to 4 games.
Yeah, a lot of Pistons fans talk about that.
Yeah, and it's weird because like it's 3, 4 games of a regular season. It shouldn't really be as memorable as it is. But the sad fact is, so I'm 22. I turned 22 in July, and for anybody who is my age, younger, or even around my age, you have not a lot to hold on to
I already
in
know
your
what you're
in
talking.
your in your life of watching basketball, and then specifically if you follow the Detroit Pistons, like there's not really a lot that you can hold on to, and it makes sense that like people still reference those first few games of the season because I mean genuinely they had so much momentum, and then they already had this offseason swing of momentum. Like granted, a lot of people criticize like them not really going out, myself included, not going out and being aggressive in free agency. I know one thing I was told was like, they had a lot of interest in Cam Johnson, and he actually had interest in reuniting with Monty Williams once Monty was signed, but the Pistons ultimately decided to go elsewhere. I had heard things about Harrison Barnes because he was the free agent last summer,
Yeah,
possibly, being interested in the, Detroit Pistons signing. And then that ultimately went nowhere. And it was just ultimately like the stalemate and lack of decision making by Troy Weaver, by the front office in general, that um, led them to a Joe Harris, Monte Morris offseason, right? But like again, it was the term was internal development. Monty Williams is his new head coach, and there was a swing of momentum. First few games, it seemed like they were going to play this modern NBA offense, and then all of a sudden, he got stuck on playing Killian, and then he got stuck on
yeah,
not playing Ivy that much, and then it continued to get worse and worse and worse throughout the year. And like I remember a lot of fans would like in the beginning of the losing, because it literally started after their loss to Portland. That I think that was, or I'm sorry, after OKC and then Portland. That's
yeah.
what
I
really
remember.
started the losing streak. Yeah. I remember being one of the first people to call this out, and I got a lot of flack for it. And I was like, I feel like this team, yes, because they had a lot of injuries, right? Like I think Boyan was hurt, and then after the OKC game, Burks went down. Joe Harris, I don't even think was available. Monte Morris was also injured. Ivy got sick. I think Bagley might have been hurt, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah,
Isaiah Livers wasn't available, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's just the injuries. This team's going to be fine." We all saw how they played even the first few games, and I was like, "I'm sorry, this team." Like after the Portland game, I was like, "This is concerning."
I feel that.
Because this is a game that the Pistons should have won against a team that is objectively not very good. And the Pistons obviously came out, and the two teams that they really like beat were Charlotte and Chicago, which are both teams that obviously were lottery teams this past year, but still like it seemed like they had their wits about them. They could play, and that's just not the case. And I remember like calling out like I think this roster construction is poor, and I think really early on, something I had said to some of like my colleagues was that I don't think Monty Williams' heart is in this job. That was, I think, the first time I recall saying that might have been genuinely preseason. And this is coming from someone who watched Monty a lot in Phoenix, and has followed. I mean, obviously, um, Devin Booker, right? That's one of my favorite NBA players
Yeah,
for a while now. So
from
I
Michigan.
like to watch exactly. Yes. And he always represents too, which is
Yeah,
what's up. But I think I was a big League Pass guy, right? So I always watched the Suns when I could on League Pass, and seeing the type of enthusiasm Monty had, and like, how you can just tell, like when you look at someone in their eyes, like if they
yeah,
have it or not that day. I never saw that look, with Monty, that like he was really invested and locked in, and I'm not even really fully blaming him But it just never struck me like this was the same Monty Williams that like I remember in the bubble, when the Suns went on that run in the NBA bubble back in 2020. He gave this amazing speech after they went undefeated about like, hey, even if we don't make the playoffs, because they did all they could to make the play in, even if we don't make the play in, like, I'm so proud of you guys and all this other stuff. I didn't see an ounce of that in Detroit. And again, I'm not fully blaming Monty, but at the end of the day, you took the job, right? And
Yeah.
I wrote an article on Bully Ball, which you can find at real or www.realbullyball.net.
Plug it. I don't mind.
Yeah, got to do it. But I remember writing this article because it was based on information I'd heard basically all year. And I'm not like Woj or Shams or even a James Edwards when it comes to sources or anything. But when I am told
Mhm.
something and I know it's reliable, I can report on it. And one of the things that I was told, like quite a bit, especially I want to say like once the losing streak really, got into
Yeah,
like the
crazy.
teens, um, you started hearing stuff. And then I remember like once it got really bad, I started hearing like the first time, like I really remember hearing this, I want to say it was like December, was like, and this was from people around the organization, right? And it was just like, I feel like sometimes he's trying to get fired. I
Yeah.
feel like he's trying to get fired because just and it's not even like a indictment on him, but like it's just like the decision making was so puzzling that like there's no other way to explain it. Sometimes it's like it almost feels like, are you trying to get fired?
I
Like what's
feel that.
going on here? Um, and yeah, I mean, I think Monty is a good dude, and I think that um it might have just not been the time or the place in Detroit. And it was what it was, and now you got JB, and that's going to be the direction moving forward. But looking back on the Monty Williams era, it's like you can't describe it as anything but a disappointment. Like a serious disappointment. Um,
I
and
can describe
you
some
can
other
blame,
words.
yeah.
Some
But
choice
yeah. I mean, you can go ahead, but for me, and I just think in general, I feel like it's a disappointment, and it's also just a perfect, honestly, reflection of the Detroit Pistons up until that point. It was this lack of accountability and this lack of being able to accept where you are and move forward and actually pick a direction with your team. Because we've been in this restoration process officially for about 5 years now. I think it was like 2019, 2019-20 season when they traded Andre. Um, and that really marked the beginning of the rebuild because that was the first time in my lifetime that the Pistons have
Yeah.
ever, blatantly tanked, and then it's been continuous ever since, right? But I think even in this restoration process, they just kept biting the bullet too soon. They were like, okay, like once half season. I remember, in Dwayne Casey's exit interview, he had talked about like, oh, you know, I remember that year where we had drafted Killian Stewart, Sadiq, all those guys. We thought we were going to make the playoffs. And you could tell every year that was their idea. And it didn't
Mhm.
obviously connect with reality. Most people could look at these rosters and go, yeah, this isn't the playoff team. But this team and organization as a whole has just refused to acknowledge reality for so long that it has caught up to them to where, reality became a nationwide embarrassment, even a global
Yeah.
embarrassment. So yeah.
No, that's a lot. I feel the same way. Like Monty, like I know a lot of fans talk about him just accepting the job for money, and to me, like accepting job for the money, that's not the big issue to me. Because me, if you gonna pay me a bunch of money, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take the job. My biggest thing, like you said, is the fact that he just didn't care about it. Like all the time, you just see him on the sideline, just looking at weird look, just like, dude, like come on, like coach me. You can still take this job, have these problems, but you can still, do your job. I mean, some of us got way harder jobs, way stressful environments, getting paid way less, and we still come to work every day and do our job. It just seemed like Monty just didn't care. But I kind of wonder, do you feel like that set the team back, or do you think it's going to be a blessing in disguise, especially when it comes to like Ivy coming off the bench and him just being that role? Do you think this kind of made him more humble on his fact that he's going to like use this season as motivation, go like, yeah, I'm a dog, show the energy.
I I feel like, with this team, I could try my hardest to spin this into a positive, but at
Yeah,
the end of the day, 28 game losing streak, winning 12 games in an 82 game season, um, being known as the Wingstop Pistons,
Yeah,
like these are things that like you can make it into what you want to make it into, but at the end of the day, like that's a
they
year
trash.
lost.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a year lost, and it's unfortunate because the team was so young, right? There's still so many young core pieces on this team, and I think when people think about development, they think about it in terms of like a linear progression, right? And they think about it in terms of just like what you see on the court. And I think a lot of it is placed onto the players, in terms of like what they can actually produce. Like we always talk about growth and progression and all these, words that these jargon, this jargon that we use for like development, right?
yeah,
So much of that relies on circumstance, and I feel like that's something that a lot of people don't talk about is like circumstance plays such a huge factor when it comes to development. Like development is more than just like getting in the gym. Development is where your confidence is, as a player.
yeah,
Development is having someone who can walk with you when you make these mistakes and tell you, hey, like let's not do that next time, and then show you. You know what I mean? Like you development is having that type of mentorship and that type of like leadership that kind of guides you onto that path. Now, there's always your exceptions who just kind of come through and become these like star players, regardless. Like even a Kate Cunningham, for example, right? Like he has gone through 3 different head coaches in the 3 full seasons he has played, you know,
it's
and
wild.
and it's wild and it's crazy because I feel like when we talk about development, like we haven't really talked about Cade's development much at all, because he's just been seen as the guy since he ever got drafted. I mean, and sure, there's a lot of expectations that come with being a number 1 pick, but like think about Cade if he had like consistent development, like a
Yeah,
consistent like coach who knew his game and they built a team around his game. Like these are all things that like factor into development. And ultimately, I look at last year and it just feels like a year lost when it comes to development, especially with a guy like Ivy. Like there was so much that happened that year, and I'm sure he'll never really come out and say like, oh, that this was bad,
yeah,
and it had this and this. Is never going to come out and outwardly say it because that's just not what the Pistons culture. If we have a culture,
yeah.
that's not what
I
it
was a
really
good dude
is.
too.
And he's a good dude, yeah. Like he's never going to come out and just trash somebody, but at the same time can't deny the fact that his confidence was visually shaken last year, right? Like
Yeah,
he had to overcome so much that development last year wasn't even about getting better. It was that proving that he was good enough.
yeah, I feel that.
And I do think as a whole, if you want to spend any positive from last season, I think there is a bigger chip on this team's shoulder than like imaginable. I think this team has a lot to prove, and I think like they're tired of being seen as a joke. And if there's any sort of positive thing that comes from last season, it's the fact that they know that they have hit rock bottom, and there is literally no way that can happen again. And I think they're all tired of that, perception.
No, I definitely feel the same way too, especially like with Cade. And like you say, he's a franchise player, and just all this pressure being put on him, and just that it's looking like he sucks when it's really just the team, and not even the team. I can't even say the team. To me, it's the organization. Tom Gordon, everybody just did a horrible job with so many things. Like we can go on and on about the horrible things that Tom Gordon did. Like me, I talk a lot of trash about Tom Jaguars. Not gonna lie, I know he's doing better now, but man, I feel like a lot of people don't really hold him as accountable as much. They talk about Troy Reaver and Dwayne Casey and Monty. Like Monty here was here for a year. Tom was here for like what going like 10 years now. He's been here for a minute, and then like we've been bad ever since Tom Gores took over. So I look at him like it's the main issue. But I do want to speak on development. You talk about development. Pistons did just drafted Ron Holland at number 5. Do you think he's going to develop a little bit different because now they got these wings there, Asar Thompson there. He's not going to be pushed into the roles like as Cade or Ivy where he can just start feel like he can slow burn, kind of grind out and just work with this hopefully coach for a long time, JB. Knock on wood,
Yeah.
he's here for at least 2 years.
Yeah. Um. So you're saying like in terms of just Ivy in general?
Ron Harlan, how do you feel
Or I'm
about him
sorry, Ron
developing?
Holland. Excuse
Yeah,
me,
yeah,
Ron
yeah,
Holland.
yeah,
Um. Yeah, with Ron specifically, I feel like he has
a lot of, we always say potential, right? Like
Yeah.
in terms of high ceiling, low floor prospects, he's up there, right? And I wouldn't even say his floor is really that low. His floor is probably just like a rotational level guy. Um, where in the rotation, I'm not quite sure quite yet, just because it's hard for me to really pull like tangible things for Ron. Like it's easy to say like what a prospect's floor is when they have like a Tristan Da Silva, for example, from this draft.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite guys. And it wasn't because I think he's going to be some all-star, all NBA type of player, but it's because I can really easily project him into being a solid like 3 and D um high level wing for a good portion of his career. Those are prospects that are pretty easy to be like, okay, it should work out for them on some level where they are like, at least a rotation player. Ron Holland is one of those guys that like I feel like the middle ground is really hard to find. And I think this year specifically, I can't necessarily say like I'm expecting like a huge rookie year or anything like that, especially because like looking at rotations, where does he fit in into the
Yeah.
rotation right now? Like you have Tim Hardaway, you have Simone Fontecchio, you have Asar Thompson, you have Tobias Harris, you have Paul Reed, um, you have Malik Beasley. Like these are all guys who can play the positions that he plays because Ron can slide anywhere from like 3 to 4, honestly. I'm sorry, not 3 to 4, 2 to 4.
Yeah.
Um, and all those positions are pretty much filled. Now, if Ron Holland, was a point guard, then yeah, there'd be the spot in the
Yeah.
position for and the rotation for him because the Pistons really lack like a true backup point guard right now. But they have a lot of wings and they have even a really athletic, not really that great of a 3-point shooting defensive wing, right? With
Yeah.
Asar, who's guaranteed to be in that rotation, probably in the starting lineup. Um, so it's hard to be like, Ron's gonna do this like year one, and we'll see progression after that and that and that. I think this is probably the first Pistons draft pick in a long time that's probably going to see some G League minutes, and I don't think that's a
Yeah.
bad thing either. I feel like the G League with the Pistons has kind of been used as this like demotion, and seen as like lower level, like a push to the side thing. Like it's like, oh, it's just
Yeah.
there, Like I think Killian was someone who could have benefited from G League minutes, and he never got them. And that was always really puzzling to me. Uh, Even honestly at points like Jaden Ivey could have used some G League minutes, and it's not even like a bad thing. I think I can't remember the specific number. I had used it for one of my articles back in the day, so I should be able to pull it. But um, I want to say the majority of the 2023 NBA draft class played some sort of minutes in the G League last season. All first round guys. Like
Yeah.
all I'd say like I think 70% of the first round. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, it was around 70% of the first round played in the G League last year. And it should not be seen as this like, oh, this prospect's already a bust, like it's over,
Yeah.
like they're playing in the G League, it's done. Um, I just think it's more so like we if we can't get you minutes on the NBA floor right now, like what good is it doing you to just sit on the bench? Like
Yeah.
obviously you can learn practice and being around guys, which you're gonna do regardless, but you should still be getting like live reps. And I think the G League is such a high level product that doesn't really get a lot of attention. And I think for that reason, a lot of people, especially within the Pistons community, see the G League as like this like insult almost. But I think Ron Holland's gonna be someone that benefits from having time in there this year. I know he was part of the G League Ignite, so he's experienced, but just being in the Piston system and using those G League minutes, I think is gonna be huge for him. And I think ceiling wise, I could 100% see him. I like highest potential ceiling, right? Uh, I see him along the lines of like a DeMar DeRozan,
Yeah.
if we're talking like reaching your truest potential. Um, my brother likes to say Jalen Brown for him.
I hear a
Like
lot of
he's
people saying that.
yeah, yeah. He just projects to be a really high level wing, and it's because like he has this raw athleticism. He's pretty scrappy on defense. Like he's a smart and scrappy defender.
Yeah.
And I think he also just seems like a player that's really motivated to get better each year. And I think that's like a really big thing. And it doesn't seem like he struggles with adversity, which there has been a lot of, so you'll fit
Yeah.
right
Feel
in, right? So
that.
yeah.
No, I feel the same way, especially with the development with the G League. I think a lot of Pistons fans want Ron to like contribute, and they're kind of questioning where he's going to fit. But to me, G League is perfect for him. Like I look at Jalen Brown, just his stats and stuff. You talk about the comparison, and I see a lot of people comparison, Brown and Holland. But I looked at Jalen Brown's stats like his rookie year. He only played like 15 minutes. So if you think about 15 minutes on the court, that's not like solid 15 minutes. That's probably like 5 minutes here and there. Maybe played a lot one day or such thing. So a lot of times he was on the G League just developing, and no one really thought about Jalen Brown until he broke out, and then it's like, oh yeah, this dude, he's the number two to Jason Tatum.
Yeah,
But
Jalen Brown's like a perfect example of like development because like you said like initially like
Wasn't seen as like the type of prospect that he is now, finals MVP. Like he
yeah,
has that on his resume now, and that's just something that a lot of people didn't really want to give him credit for. Even when like the Jays became a thing, like
yeah,
Tatum really got a lot of the shine and up until like the last like year or two. Um, and it just goes to show that like sometimes like players just don't pop overnight a lot of
yeah,
times. Like unless you are a Luka Doncic, unless you are a Victor Wembanyama, a John Morant, like even I would put Kate Cunningham in that category. I would say like he's one of those guys that like regardless of situation, I think like he's at a point now where like last season, if this team won 12 more games, he would have been in all-star conversations.
I feel that.
Um, but it's just don't get me started on the whole Kate thing. Truly,
No, it's
I
water on the
can't, I
bridge. I
can't.
feel you.
Yeah, I can't get because man, that discourse. I've been seeing some interesting things being said about him lately. That's just
I feel that. That's what me. I'm on social media, but I'm not really on social media. A
yeah,
lot of times I just got off because some people they do go crazy. I understand, like
yeah.
some fans, all fan bases really just go crazy. I'm like, man, we all chill, with just basketball. Like, you're not getting paid for this. Like, so other things going
Yeah,
on, but yeah, people go
yeah,
wild sometimes. But I
yeah.
do kind
It's
of want to talk
just
about. Go ahead, my
go
bad.
ahead. No, no, no. Go ahead.
No, I want to talk a little bit about the draft because you talk about players being bust and stuff. I look at like this draft class, kind of like the Anthony Bennett draft class. Like I'm not really high on Sar, even though I thought he was gonna go number one. I see him almost like Anthony Bennett, but like I don't like using the word bust. I feel like if anyone's getting drafted, they just made like $1 million. They set their
Yeah.
family up. Like it's to me, bust is just a bad word. They're doing better than any of us would do out here just by getting drafted. So I don't like using that word, but I just feel like this draft class is gonna be like the Anthony Bennett draft class, where you got the number one pick who didn't do good, even though Sar, he was number two. But you're gonna have these top picks. You're not gonna do good, but it's gonna be players like the Ron Hollins and the people who was drafted like what was Jay Williams drafted like seventh or something like. But anyway, people like in the 15th round, all
Hmm.
people who was just late drafts. I feel like they're gonna break out more and just be them type of superstars. So that being said, do you see anyone in this draft class who's looking like a sleeper that might be the real deal?
Yeah. So that was always the thing with this draft class was like, I feel like it was never going to be like the first three guys, probably.
Yeah,
That's not to say they're not going to be stars or anything like that, but just it's one of those drafts where a lot of people had to come to their own decisions about things. You know what I mean? Like they had to really just like make their own decision versus a general consensus. And with those types of drafts, like you have teams that go for players that like another team wouldn't even consider, and they maybe see an all-star in those types of players. So I always find these drafts really interesting, honestly. Because it's easy to be like Victor Wembanyama is going to be amazing, right?
yeah,
Like, and to see his career is going to be awesome. But anybody could say that, like you're not like a genius for drafting, Victor Wembanyama or
yeah.
even like a Brandon Miller. Like you're not. Yeah, I feel like you don't really deserve a whole lot of credit for that.
I feel
But
it.
I feel like it's when you find those like Jalen Williams types of players, um, that the draft really gets interesting. And I think this year, Cody Williams, ironically, was one of the guys that I kind of came around on.
Yeah,
He's someone in the draft circles is really divisive because some guys either think he's like, really solid and projects to be this high level wing, or think he's completely overrated and doesn't really have a serviceable skill. But the more I watch Cody, because I remember his name getting mentioned a lot with the Detroit
Yeah,
Pistons, the more I watch Cody, the more I'm like, I'm in on him as
yeah,
a whole. I think he has a lot of size, and I think he has a lot of skill that like can develop. He's someone that I liken to a Jeremy Grant, ironically. Now that's not me saying like he's gonna be some,
oh yeah, no, you don't gotta explain
all
that.
world, yeah,
Yeah,
all world type of like, all NBA MVP type of guy. But that's still like a Jeremy has been like a borderline all-star at points in his career.
yeah,
And like that's the best a lot of teams can hope for when you go in the draft. Like everybody wants the next Giannis, everybody wants like the next Jokic. But reality is, like, you have nailed your draft if you can find a guy like a Jeremy Grant.
yeah. I
You know
feel
what I
that.
mean? Like, I feel like those types of guys are like ones that you can have for a long time that like get paid after a while
Yeah,
and like really always have value. Like ever since the Pistons traded Jeremy, they've needed a guy like Jeremy, right? Like now
yeah,
for the first time, I can say they had like a guy who can play that 3-4 position. Granted, doesn't have the athleticism Jeremy did, but plays a similar role with Tobias. Like they've desperately missed that ever since Jeremy got moved. And I think Cody Williams is going to be a guy that I want to watch in this draft. Tristan Da Silva was another one for me that I was pretty high on. Again, not a guy I think is going to be like
yeah.
MVP caliber. I honestly I don't really know if there is that like MVP caliber guy. If there is, I really got super high on Rob Dillingham.
I feel that.
Um,
Yeah,
Rob Dillingham to me is like everybody says he's like so shifty, and like that's really like the best word
yeah,
to describe him is like shifty. Um, he has like, in my opinion, the potential to be like the Tyrese Maxey of this
yeah.
class.
See that?
Um, I watch his game and I'm like, there's no way now, especially in Minnesota, where he's in a position like Tyrese Maxey, where he's already in a position where like you're going to win now. Like it's not like he's
Yeah,
just going to be on some team where he's like losing and is, treading water for a lot of time. Like he's going to be thrown right into it. And like, granted, I don't think he's going to be starting this year or anything like that because Mike Conley's still there, but like he'll probably be their backup point guard. And if he's not, like he'll get put into that role by the end of the season. And I think he's gonna pop. If there is a guy that didn't go top 3, top 5, that I can see being like an all-star, like all NBA type of guy, I think it's Rob Dillingham. And I think if he does that backcourt with him and Anthony Edwards, we're gonna be looking at like what the Timberwolves paid for that draft pick and be like, how did they get away with robbery
yeah,
like this in 2024? Because they really like paid nickels for a pick from the Spurs that like the Spurs could have made, like it's just
yeah.
it's baffling to me that like Rob didn't really get the hype that I thought he did. And I think some of it's because of his size, but especially when you're going to be in that backcourt with Anthony Edwards, I think that might in a few years that might be the most exciting backcourt like in the NBA. Like that might be one of those backcourts that like you look back on for a long time and go like that was special. I'm glad I got to witness that.
No, I'm glad you said it because I feel the same way. But I'm gonna talk more about that on my T-Bus breakdown video. But I definitely feel like the Spurs kind of slipped with that. But also, they probably know more than me. But I do think T-Bus got to still will get in dental hand, especially with their contract situation, second Aikman and all that stuff. I feel like it was a smart move. That not too much people really realize how smart of a move it was. But I do want to talk about something we got to talk about because you brought him up too. Tobias Harris. I hear this man getting a lot of flack and people just hating on him. Like, I always liked Tobias. When he came to Detroit, like even before he came to Detroit, I was like, I was happy we got him because I remember him on the Bucks, on the Magic. He was just a shooter. He was always this tweener type of guy. And it just seemed like ever since he went to Philly, he just getting like the most hate just for the same thing Monty did, getting that money.
Yeah, I don't know. Like with Tobias, I've never understood the hate he gets.
Yeah.
Truly, like, granted, do I think he was worth the contract that he was given? No. But is that his
Yeah.
fault? No. Be mad at like the 76ers front office. Why that hate got directed at
Yeah.
Tobias? Never made
Sure,
sense to
Tobias
me.
over me. I had to bring that up.
Which, don't get me wrong, led to a great clip and some good crumble cookie memes over the years.
Yeah.
But like I just I never quite understood it, because to me, like, you want to talk, I talked about those like Tristan Da Silva types and the Jeremy Grants of the like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, I feel like he's always going to be one of those guys that is going to contribute to winning. You know, like you look at Tobias Harris, everywhere he has went, he has contributed to winning.
yeah,
The Pistons played like, he's the only player on this Pistons team that can say he has played a playoff game with the Detroit Pistons.
it is
You know,
wild.
like,
Yeah,
that's not like something to scoff at. Like, and I know that this is a storied franchise, and, you know, making the playoffs isn't really like considered an accomplishment or anything like that. But when you look at how the last half decade now has
yeah,
gone, like, we're
hurts.
coming up on, it is like, once we get to 2025, we will be closer to 10 years than we're not to the last Pistons playoff appearance.
It's sad too.
2019 will be 6 years um this coming season, and I that's just insane to me. And it's just going to keep going up and up until they like eventually make a playoff run here. And it's been, even we're coming up on 2 decades since a playoff win now.
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy. Well, I swear we took the Golden Work team for granted. Like I didn't realize that I was super young, but like yeah, we definitely took that team for granted.
I
But
yeah, I was like young, like, I was like, I remember seeing the last actual, I remember that
mm,
playoff series against Cleveland where LeBron went like thermonuclear, right?
I was mad that game.
I was there. I was
Yeah,
there, but I was just like, "Oh, we'll be back," right? Because I was a
yeah,
little kid. I was really little. I think I was like 4 or 5 years old, maybe. Like,
hmm,
maybe 6. Um, and I remember, because I met LeBron's mom, actually.
oh dang.
Funny story. I met LeBron's mom that day. But I
My
just thought this was
Devontae West.
normal.
I'm thinking about Devontae West. My bad. So he said his mom.
That
He just went
was
there.
that was around the time where those rumors were going on. But
Yeah,
yeah, I remember like thinking at that time, like, again, I was a little kid, like, what do I know? But
yeah,
I was thinking like, okay, like, yeah, we'll be back. I was just used to this. Um and it just never happened, right? And I think now, kind of being more so in like the media position as like a objective person versus like, because genuinely, like, my Pistons fandom, um within the last, I would say, like 2 years, since I've really gotten like deep into the media thing, I
yeah,
always thought the beat dudes were like capping when they'd be like, "Oh, you know, if I grew up a Pistons fan, it's not really the same anymore. Like, I can't say I'm like as big of a fan of the team."
yeah,
Like, I always thought they were capping until now. Because really, like, I feel like I look at fandom when it comes to the Detroit Pistons in like a past tense. Um,
yeah. It's
but
more work now.
yeah,
I
but
feel it.
I've been rambling so long, I forgot my original point.
No, it's all
But
good. I do it all
basically,
the time.
yeah,
So,
with Tobias, he's one of those guys that like has won. He went to the Clippers and won. He went to Philadelphia and won. That's why he got a big contract. Now, he's not winning championships or anything, but he makes meaningful impact on this team. And I feel like a lot of people are really underrating the type of impact that a player like him can have on this team, because they've missed someone like him. Like, they've had Boyan, sure, but like, with all due respect, Boyan does not have a back to the
yeah,
basket game the way Tobias does. He's not going to guard another team's best player. And he's also a lot older than Tobias. You know, like, Tobias is what, 31,
something like
30,
that.
like,
31,
yeah,
32, something like that.
yeah. He's still got some years where like he's still going to be considered in his prime versus like, you know, Boyan, who's coming like into like the decline
Limping.
part, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
the old man in the
it's a,
cane.
yeah, man, like, he even admitted like this year, like, his calves are just like basically like done. Like,
Yeah,
he had like nothing. I remember being in the meeting room for that. Like, he's like, yeah, my calves just like, I'm never gonna not have problems with them.
yeah. That's not something
So
you want to hear. Like for real.
no, no, and that's why they had to like trade him for basically like what ended up being Tim Hardaway Jr. and like a couple second round picks. Um,
I want to talk more about that too. Tim Hardaway
yeah.
Jr. Like a lot of people are kind of confused by that move or trading Tim Hardaway for Quentin Grimes. But how do you feel about that?
So to me, it wasn't surprising because I had heard
Yeah,
Tim Hardaway's name now connected with the Detroit Pistons
yeah,
for quite some time. And I also knew that like Quentin Grimes, especially with the transition of the front office, was not someone I saw as like really sticking around a whole lot. I do think Dallas is going to be a better fit for Quentin, and hopefully like he can really like hit his groove there. But uh, Tim Hardaway is someone I know Cade has wanted to play with. I feel like
Yeah,
I think that's public information. Like Cade has wanted to play with Tim Hardaway since like his rookie year.
yeah,
And it's pretty obvious if you look at his game. Why? Because he's just a shooter. If you look at like, and I know everyone's probably going to point to like this past season where Tim Hardaway was out of the rotation during the playoffs, but like as a whole, I would say Tim Hardaway did not get the contract he had for no reason, right? Like he
yeah,
played
for real.
really well with Luca. It was a big deal when he re-signed with Dallas. I remember seeing a lot of Mavericks fans really happy that he re-signed.
The third
Like
option.
recency
Yeah,
bias is super strong. Like that is something that I feel like a lot of people take for granted. Because I remember like obviously he's someone who's like not a he's someone when Tim Hardaway's on, he's great. Like you love having him on your team. When he's not on, you know,
yeah.
there's some shots that go
He's
up
streaky.
sometimes.
He's streaky.
You're like, okay,
Yeah,
where was the thought process here? But Tim Hardaway, I feel like is going to provide basically the same role that he played with Luca because Cade and Luca's games are so similar. Um, in terms of just how they operate on the basketball court, I feel like it's going to be a seamless fit playing next to Cade. And I think he'll be a great fit on the team in general because this is the first time in a very long time I can say this team actually has spacing and they have multiple shooters, not just
yeah,
a shooter, or a guy who used to be a shooter or a theoretical shooter. Like they actually
yeah.
have proven shooting on this team.
No, I feel the same way. I feel like Tim Hardaway is actually going to provide a lot of stuff. Tobias as well too, but I think Tobias or Tim, since he kind of like you said, Cade won him there. I feel like he's going to mentor Cade and like situation. Just growing up as a man as well. Just growing in NBA. His dad played in NBA. It's a lot of gems that you can learn from someone like that. So with Cade, I feel like he's going to just kind of take off just from the mental aspect of all right, you guys lost all these games, but it's not the end of the world. You still got your contract, you still got your family together, just little things like that. So I really think Tim Hardaway is going to be a great addition, but I also think he's going to get traded. I feel like I'll talk about that later on because I do want to talk about some more Pistons players, but I do feel like Tim Hardaway is going to get traded like deadline with someone. But we might as well bring it up. What do you think he'll get traded for if he does get traded?
So that's interesting because like with trades right now, it's really hard to even project who or what trade would look like for anybody because this team is like it still seems like a work in progress almost,
Yeah,
because like you're looking at the roster and like, yeah, like okay, I can say you have depth at shooting guard, you have depth at small forward, you have depth at power forward, and I think you have depth at center if you want to play Isaiah Stewart as that backup center. Or if you play, I like that's a little confusing. You know what they're gonna do with Paul Reed, Isaiah Stewart.
yeah, I feel the
Is
same.
Paul Reed the third guy? I don't know. Like, is he third center? Is he your backup power forward? We'll see. But the one thing they haven't had so far is a backup point guard. Now does that mean Jaden Ivey's going to be that? Possibly. Um, that's yet to be seen. I know JB said that he wants both of them on the court at all times. So maybe that means like when Cade's out, that Ivy's in, and vice versa, or like, and then eventually at the end of the game, they share minutes together or something. I couldn't tell you. But if a Tim Hardaway Jr. trade were to come about, I would assume it's at the deadline. And it really depends on two things. Are the Pistons now in a position where they are pushing for a play-in spot? Or are the Pistons in a position where they now have to prioritize going for the draft yet again? And if they're in the latter, and let's say Tim Hardaway Jr. picks up production to where maybe he's averaging like a 12, 13 points per game, you know,
She should.
off of like, instead of, I can't pull up the numbers off the top of my head, but let's say he's shooting like 38, 39% on three off of like decent volume. You could probably get like a second rounder for him,
I feel
or
that.
like I feel like that's really like all you can ask for a Tim Hardaway because I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, he gets his value up and then we can get a first round pick for him by like a desperate team. But if you look at the new CBA and how valuable first round picks are, first round picks are not just going to get thrown around like they used to
Yeah,
anymore. Like these are really valuable picks that aren't going to be used for anything, in my opinion, besides like your star level guys, like the guys that like you absolutely need to go and get. Like even at OG Anunoby this past season, granted he was on an expiring contract, he didn't get traded for a first round pick. It was
Yeah.
RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly, which great value, don't get me wrong, but there was no first round pick thrown in that trade. And I think it's going to continue to be a trend where like maybe you get traded young players versus draft assets, because draft assets have become so valuable because of the way the new CBA is constructed, where um, teams are going to be hard capped and they need to go and find guys in the draft, because the guys in the draft are not going to get paid as much as other guys that you might need. And then, you never know what happens there. So I feel like the best you can hope for is like second round pick compensation, and even that has become more valuable. So it's really hard, honestly, to project like what a Tim Hardaway Jr. trade would look like. Now, if they were in the first position where they're pushing for the play in, I could see him getting thrown in as salary filler for like a, I don't even know. Let's say they wanted to go for like a, give me a name like
I've been looking at a lot because I feel like a lot of Pistons fans been looking at big names like
mhm,
Brandon Ingram and who was the other guy that he's looking at for a while? Oh, Nick Claxton and stuff like that. I
yeah,
really think the best thing the Pistons probably gonna do is either trade Tim Hardaway or just anyone for someone like Norman Powell, who got the same type of contract but more
that's a great
defensive,
call.
can shoot the three. And also, I'm looking at teams like Memphis and what's the name, Denver. A lot of Pistons fans are looking at this big fish like Brandon Ingram and all them, but I mean Denver, they have to make some moves. I made a video about them earlier. They have to trade that team down pretty soon. So what about someone like, even though the fit is kind of weird, someone like AG Aaron Gordon, or someone like even though he's not healthy, Michael Porter Jr. Even looking at Memphis, like it's crazy, but Memphis can tear their whole team up. I'm gonna talk more about that in my video, but
Yeah.
they can tear their whole team up, and we can mess around and get, Jaren Jackson Jr. You never know the things going down, but I really think instead of looking at Brandon Ingram, it's a lot of moves that the Pistons can sneaky their ways in there. It just depends where the season goes, but I really think Norman Powell is something they should look into.
Yeah, I like that one a lot, actually. Norman Powell is someone that like I feel like would be a perfect fit on this team, and especially fit into that shooting guard role. Like I know you got Malik
Yeah,
Beasley, but if you have Malik Beasley and Norman Powell, that's a great 1-2 punch. And he can also play the three position as well. So that'd be a great one. And the Clippers are in a weird position now where like no Paul George, and they didn't get
yeah,
anything in return for Paul George. And then you got Kawhi, who was relatively healthy last season, but like that's never something you can guarantee. And then you still got James Harden, but like James Harden's on the decline as well. So like
yeah.
they're
We can
gonna
start on
eventually
him.
have to, yeah. So they're gonna eventually have to pick a direction, and it feels like the direction might have to just end up coming to them versus them getting to that point. But if they wanted to start out small and just shed salary, because Tim Harden will be a expiring contract next season,
Yeah,
Norman Powell would be a Norman Powell for Tim Hardaway, and that maybe they're not even trying to, rebuild or anything, but Tim Hardaway kind of fits the same role that Norman Powell does, obviously just with less production, and then also won't be on the books for them the next season. So I could 100% see something like that happening. I think Michael Porter Jr. is a really interesting name, especially if the Nuggets don't come out swinging like they were. Because last season I think they got a lot of slack for not performing as well. And I
yeah,
felt like a lot of times they were coasting in the regular season. And I think they got away with it because they had just won the championship and everyone's kind of saw them as like favorites to repeat. But it's possible like Denver, looks at like a Michael Porter Jr. and they see like they're looking at their contract sheet and they're like, I don't know if like you fit in here, in the long term. I can't see them trading Aaron Gordon as much, just because of the defensive presence he provides, and that's really valuable. And I mean, honestly, you can pinpoint that championship to the Aaron Gordon trade.
yeah,
Like I feel like he's someone that it'd be shocking to me if they moved on from super soon. And Michael Porter Jr. also like might be just like a guy that maybe they don't see as a long-term fit because his contract is pretty large and
huge.
like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
pretty big, and like that could still fit into the Pistons, salary cap sheet. Now, would that take up a lot of the space? Yeah. And do you want that and Tobias's contracts on the books at the same time. I don't know. But yeah, I think those are both great picks.
Yeah, I definitely feel like people are slipping on just the moves that can be made. If people are just focusing on that big fish too much. But also, I want to talk about the backup center position. You mentioned Paul Reed. I don't. I still feel like the Pistons should have went for someone who's 7 foot. Like I feel like Stu can hold it down. Don't get me wrong, but I really feel like that's a big weakness for them to have 6'8", 6'9" centers backing them up, especially with Jalen Durant, not being the best rim protector. So, how do you feel about their depth within the center position?
I actually feel like their center position depth is pretty solid right now, and that's probably just because I've always been a pretty big um proponent of
Paul Reed.
Isaiah Stewart's game.
Oh,
And I see him as like the guaranteed backup center for this team if they don't play him at power forward, which I can't imagine they do.
yeah,
Um, so I feel like for me, I see Isaiah Stewart as the backup five, which I think is his best position. Truly, I think the center is like I absolutely his best position, allows his game to thrive, and then that also allows you to put Paul Reed like. And I was looking at the lineups, like let's say the Pistons hypothetically start Cade, Malik Beasley, Asar Thompson, Tobias Harris, Jalen Duren, right? That leaves you with like a bench lineup of like Jaden Ivey, Tim Hardaway Jr., Simone Fontecchio, and then who plays the four?
yeah,
I think that's probably where Paul Reed slips in. And I think that's also going to make up for the size, lack of size that they have. Is if you have that 1-2 punch at the 4 and the 5, your backup 4 and 5 being Paul Reed and Isaiah Stewart, I feel like you kind of make up for the paint presence because I think they're both pretty scrappy and I would say versatile defenders. Like those are two guys that can switch quite a bit. I think Isaiah Stewart doesn't get enough credit for being able to switch as much as he
yeah,
can. Like he can guard. I remember like him guarding Chris Paul and shutting down Chris Paul, like and
yeah.
Isaiah Stewart is like damn near like 7,
200
8,
pounds. He's
yeah,
big.
7, 8
Yeah,
inches taller than Chris Paul. And like, you know, he's a large dude, pause, but
yeah.
like he's a large
I
dude.
feel that.
And he shouldn't be able to shut down point guards, but that's something he can do. So I think having that type of switchability with both of your bigs coming off the bench would be something that's really helpful. And Paul Reed, someone who can stretch the floor on offense as well. Now, granted, he's not even as good of a shooter as Isaiah Stewart is, but he's not someone who's limited to just the paint.
No, I feel that.
Um, I think he had a 40-point game last season, I want to say. And obviously
It
it's
was
not
like
something you're gonna expect
no, I think it was like
every night.
29. I remember looking at his highlights. I think it was like
Oh,
I'm
was it
at 39, 39, my
a
bad. But it was
39?
real
Yeah.
close. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's obviously not something you can expect every night with Paul
Yeah.
Reed, right? But like, he has that in his bag where like he has an offensive skill set that you can use. And I think him and Isaiah Stewart, if they do choose to play them together, I think that'd be a great combo off the bench. So I think it does make up for the size because I do think the size is an issue, but I think the size is an issue when it comes to rim protecting for the Detroit Pistons because Jalen Duren wasn't a good rim protector last year. Like, there's just no way around it.
Yeah.
He struggled with rim protecting, and um, I think it's an effort thing. And I think if he just improves and puts effort on defense, because he was a good rim. We talked about the first 3 games, 4 games of the season. Like he was a good rim protector then, and then it
Yeah.
just kind of declined as the season went on. So if he does step up on defense, then I think you don't really need that 7-footer as bad.
I feel that. I know you gotta get out of here. He's talking about Paul Reed and Isaiah Stewart. They're playing your brand, Bully Brawl.
Yeah, great
Yeah,
transition there.
I feel that. But plug it in, it's almost time for you to get out of here. I know that. So, check you out on the Bully
Um,
Brawl.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Bully Ball is, for those who don't know, it's my media company at Real Bully Ball on everything. We do a lot of Tigers content right now, just because of how insane this run they're going on is. But also we'll be doing a lot. And this is me saying this is gonna be a lot of Detroit Pistons content coming soon from me. Media day starts up on the 30th. I've had a Ron Holland article in the chamber for
Mhm.
a long time now where I talked to him for a little bit. um I'll have more in-season coverage just in terms of writing, and hopefully I'm going to start doing some more video here as well. because I just feel like I've been slacking on that end, and
Yeah.
that's really where I started with everything was video, and I haven't really been doing as much of it lately. So I'll be doing more of that, and then of course, as always, I do my photography as well, which you can find at Real Bully Ball on any of our social media and at Zariq Xavier on any of my social media. I just posted some like archive pictures I had where it was just some leftovers from last season. So yeah, I'm excited to get going, and I appreciate the plug. That was great. I
I
was
feel like-
truly impressed there.
no, I appreciate you just coming on here as well and stuff. Just because this is a small podcast, I wanted to grow, but I've been looking at you on social media for a while. I was like, man, I want to connect with more people, just because. Be honest, not to be all deep. I'm kind of a deep thinker anyway, but life is too short. I want to connect with people more and just have relationships. But yeah, I really appreciate it. But before you get out here, I know we said get out here. Gotta
No, yeah,
ask
no
you,
worries.
what you listening to? It says a music podcast as well.
Of
What you
course.
listening?
What time is it right now?
Some
It's
time you go about
4:07.
4:07. Yeah,
I mean, if you want to go for a few more minutes, I can.
I don't
But
want to waste
because
your time. It's
once
all good.
you get me started on music,
Yeah.
lately I've been listening to Fouché. Her album
Hmm.
came out recently. She's like this if anyone doesn't know, Fouché is like a R&B alternative type
Hmm.
of artist. She lives on Steve Lacy's album a couple years ago, and then she was on Tizo Touchdown's album last year. And was my favorite feature on both albums. So I was really
Yeah.
looking forward to this. And it's such an interesting sounding album. Like
Yeah.
I remember like playing literally the first song in my car, and I was like, I had to pause it. You know when
Yeah.
like you play something that's so interesting, you just like, hold on, like
Let me
I
rewind
gotta
this a
like
little bit.
let me
Yeah.
rewind this just because like the way she implements natural dialectic sound. Oh my god, dia diegetic sound. There we go. Come through film school.
Yeah.
Into her music is so interesting, and it sounds so different from anything else I've listened to this year, or in general. Like she has such
Yeah.
a unique sound to her that's like very. It's like a beautiful blend between alternative and R&B
Yeah.
that I really enjoyed. Because I'm definitely a old soul and a R&B soul, so
Same
I
here.
definitely
Same.
yeah. So I've always like really loved R&B cuts and slower songs. That doesn't get me wrong. Like I was just listening to Mixtape Pluto, Future's new album,
Yeah.
as well. And like I still like everything. I'm someone who likes a little bit of everything as well. But it's been a lot of Fouché lately. I've listened to some Future, his new album. I
Yeah.
liked it. I didn't love it though. I
I
thought the
feel
two
that.
albums he did with Metro Boomin this year were a lot better. Um,
I
I
never
also
really
been
got into
listening.
Future. I don't know why, but
It's an acquired taste, I feel like.
yeah,
You know, like it's something that like
my stomach froze up. That's crazy.
oh, did I cut out for a second there?
He froze up. It's all good.
Oh man. Yeah, Future's an acquired taste for sure. Like he either like you love him or you just doesn't connect with you. But Future I've definitely been listening to a little bit lately. And weirdly, I've been going back to the Kendrick Lamar beef tracks.
I feel
And
that.
I think with the whole Diddy thing, it's just been like something like I've
Yeah.
been like, okay, because I feel like he's been. And I was actually talking with my dad about this. I feel like it's just like this commentary about the culture as a whole versus
Yeah.
just Drake. And I think initially when the beef and everything like that happened with Drake, it was seen as like, oh, he's coming for Drake specifically and all that type of
Yeah.
stuff. But like, I I'm real like especially the last track he put out on his Instagram, like the Watch the Party Die one.
Yeah.
It's just about the culture in general, and I just have been like going back. I played Euphoria right before I did this because I was
Yeah.
walking
He's
my
getting
dog.
piped up. Okay, that's what's up.
Yeah. I was walking my dog, and I just because it's just like something I've been thinking about, and I listened
Yeah.
to it, and it just feels like, in my opinion, I feel like he used the Drake beef as kind of album rollout because I
I
think
feel
this
that.
album, wherever it comes out, whenever it comes out, it seems the theme is really just a reflection of the culture and things like he really
Yeah.
wants to take down. And I think he took down Drake
Yeah.
as like the start of it. I think it wasn't just like, oh, I hate Drake and I'm just gonna start beefing with Drake like most rap beefs where it's just like true animosity.
Yeah.
Um, I think he used Drake as like a pawn almost. Like
I
he's
feel
like
that.
he used him as an example. Like this is what I think is wrong with the culture, and now I'm getting rid
Yeah.
of him. Um,
I've been seeing a
it's not to
lot
say
of
Drake's gonna ever go away though. 'Cause I'm a huge Drake
yeah.
fan myself. I can't lie. I've always
Yeah.
loved Drake.
I
But
can't do it. I never got
yeah,
into it.
it's okay. It's all right.
I
I'm at
tried
this point
to.
in my life where I'm like, I just if you don't like Drake, that's fine. There's
I
some
feel it.
people
I
around
just
be
say
like,
it's not
I
for
don't.
me,
Why don't?
you know.
Yeah.
But
What about you though?
I haven't listened to much. I mean, you talk about Diddy, though. That junk is funny to me, but it's not. But like I haven't listened to a lot of music lately. I just been listening to like a lot of podcasts. I think it's really because I'm only like 15 minutes away from my job, so I'm
Mhm.
not in the car much. Like when I'm in around the house, I'm not really listening to music as much. But I have checked out. I reviewed a little bit. Common's new CD. It's a nice
Okay.
one. And who else was that? I listened to Eminem just because like this is the only last CDs I just listened to. Like Eminem, I wasn't checking for at all. And I was like, let me check him out just because you know he is a, a legendary artist. I'm like, let me check him out and see what he's on. But his album's actually kind of nice. I only listened to it one time, but
Mhm.
it's like that old Eminem that we, all grew up on. So I'm like, all right, Eminem might just be back. He been trashed for a long time. Don't get me wrong, but it's like, I was like, he actually this crazy white boy stuff. That's the Eminem I want. You know what I mean? Like I made a review about it. Like if you watch South Park, we watch it for the craziness and all the killing up people's parents and feed them chilies. Like that's the stuff you want to hear with Eminem. You don't want to hear him like, "I'm not afraid." Like I'm not trying to hear that. This lovey-dovey
Yeah.
stuff. I want the crazy stuff that's gonna make me laugh and be like, "Dang, this is kind of offensive, but it rhymes."
Yeah.
It's
That's
still
yeah,
bars.
I still haven't checked out the Eminem album. I probably should because I have heard it's better than his most recent stuff. And I always hesitate to say anything negative about
Yeah,
Eminem, especially, us being out here.
yeah, I feel
There's
that.
certain people that just do not play about him at all.
Yeah,
Certain people, I'm just
I
saying,
feel
no,
you. Hey, you can say that. I said
don't,
it on my podcast too.
yeah. But I definitely grew up an Eminem fan. I just in the last years, like I haven't really connected with his music as much. So I definitely give that one a listen though.
I feel that. But no, I listen to a lot of soul music too, though. So it's like it's hard for me to get in some of this music because I'm like I try to watch what I put in my brains because I don't know. I'm just a cool dude who like listen to old school stuff a lot of time. You see my Twitter handlers like
Yeah.
Marvin Gaye. That's one of my favorite artists. So like I'll put on some old school in a minute and just chill out and just vibe to that.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of Stevie Wonder as well lately.
People sleep on him. I
Um,
didn't realize how cold he was.
he, man, I think no music really connects with my emotions more than Stevie's. Like
I feel that.
he's someone who I feel like I listen to him and like ever since I was little, ever since I listened to his music, it
Yeah,
always just connects with like a deeper part of my like brain and soul in general, and it evokes this type of emotional response a lot of times I don't even understand.
I
But
feel that.
older I've gotten, more I've grown to appreciate his music.
I just wish I was born in the 70s sometimes, man. Like I love social media and everything, but it just seemed like the 70s, like everything about it just seemed cool. Like the way they talk, what's up, Jive, turkey sucker? Like it just sound cool. Just like imagine just, flaming somebody and just like, yeah, Jive, turkey sucker. Yeah, they're fish. Like just saying listen some weird words that don't even
M-
matter. But
my
everybody
life
just
has
like,
really been
oh
missing calling some dude a random dude, just calling them a cat. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying?
You
This
cool
cat
cat
over here.
jellyfish on the backhand side, that stuff like it just seemed like it was dope back then, but
Yeah.
I'll let you get out of here. I know you gotta get out of here. I'm about to maybe finally get me a new phone. I got this old Galaxy S9 and yeah, you see right here my
Which
picture though. It's all off and everything.
it's all faded, but the
Yeah.
the outline's still there at least. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
need to. I just got a new one last year, but like I'm ready to upgrade. But I still got a couple more years before I can do
I feel
so.
you. But yeah, again, appreciate you having me on here. Had you on a
Of
little bit longer
course.
than expected, but yeah, we appreciate it. Tell everyone to plug again and we're gonna be out for real.
Yeah, again, I really appreciate you having me on here. We've been talking on Twitter for so long, so I was like, you
Yeah.
reached out to ask about this. I was like, of course.
I'm glad you said it
Um,
too, and no, no hesitation too. It could have been a weird
yeah,
podcast.
nah, no, yeah, it's all love.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I at Zariq Xavier on any social media. I just posted some on my Instagram, some old Pistons photography. Not really old, it's from last season. Some
That's
Pistons
right.
and Cruise photography that I did just because I'm ready for the season to start now.
Yeah.
I'll be doing writing, I'll be doing videos, I'll be doing whatever you can find at Real Bully Ball that's anything sports related, but specifically Pistons and basketball in general has been my groove lately. So you'll be finding a lot more of my work soon. We'll be starting up a Substack pretty soon that'll replace our current website, but our website, regardless of Substack or our current website, is www.bullyball.net. You can find my collection of photography articles. My friend Jake, he does amazing work with college football, Tigers, just anything in general we try to cover. And yeah,
All right, cool. Got you. Well, yeah, thanks again, and peace, man.
peace.